Hello guys and welcome back to Dark Horse FM, and in today's video we're going to be covering defensive pairings or centre back pairings. Yeah, not defensive, centre back pairings in Football Manager 2022. Yeah, and the idea behind this video is to actually explain to you guys how I managed to set up defensive pairings, defensive roles in the game, centre back roles in the game based on the players that I have. Now in this video I have three teams loaded up in the save, right? Zebre, Juventus, Salernitana and Sampdoria. So these three teams are of different quality in the same league. Salernitana is predicted to finish last on the table. Sampdoria is predicted to finish 10th. In a league of 20 teams, that's mid-table, right? Accurate mid-table. So that's Sampdoria. And then Juventus, obviously, they are predicted to finish second. I would have chosen Inter, but I think Juventus was a bit more interesting. I don't know why I chose Juventus in the end. So if you're new to the channel, remember to hit the subscribe button and also to leave a like on this video if you find it very useful. We're going to go through centre backs and how to set up your centre backs based on the players that you have. So first of all, we're going to start with Juventus, then we're going to do the same thing that we did for Juventus, and we'll do it for Sampdoria, and then we'll do it for Salernitana as well. So for me, when choosing centre back pairings, if I'm using an elite team, if you're managing an elite team like Juventus, there are three possible centre back pairings you should look to or you should aim for when you're using a top team like Juventus. The first centre back pairing is the simple central defender pairing. These two will cycle possession between themselves and then they'll play to more creative players up front. Central defenders will not look to clear the ball out sooner than expected. They will not just hoof the ball up carelessly. Their plan will be to actually look for the safest way possible to get the ball out of the defense. If that is to clear the ball, they will clear it. If that is to pass the ball to a more creative player, they will do that. But compared to the no-nonsense centre back, the no-nonsense centre back will look to clear the ball back. He will look to clear the ball out of defense instantly. He will not look to choose whether there's a more creative player ahead of him or beside him. He will just look to clear the ball out of the defense. For an elite team, this is not really the way to go. You would want to have ideally two central defenders that are good on the ball, that can play the ball back simply between themselves or to a more creative player to recycle possession and start the play from there. A second pairing would be the ball playing defender and a central defender. This pairing is quite the ideal for me when I'm using a top team. It's to use one player that is more safe on the ball and then the other central defender that is more adventurous on the ball. The ball playing defender will look to play higher, like we look to play risky passes into opposition areas and look to unlock defenses all the way from the back line. This looks very well if you this sits well with a player like Virgil van Dijk because he has good vision and good passing range as well. The central defender beside him, on the other hand, will look to play simple passes to somebody else that is more creative, to a wing back for example, or he will look to play to the ball playing defender that is more creative beside him. He would only clear the ball when there is literally no option to pass to, and then he will look to hit the ball long and get it out of defense as soon as possible. The last pairing I go for when I'm using an elite team, and ideally this pairing is not something I use very often, is to use both ball playing defenders on like two center halves as ball playing defenders. So if you're using two center halves ball playing defenders, your defense is going to be very creative, and none of them would look to, or both center halves will look to play adventurous passes into the opposition territory. If you have a very advanced creative tactic, this setup is going to work very well for you. And if you have two center halves that are very good on the ball with good vision, it is a very lethal approach to play out from defense. So your two center halves have the capacity to play risky passes into opposition areas, and they would look to find the killer pass that can unlock the defense all the way from the back line. It's a very adventurous system, and I think most of the elite teams go for this setup, having two ball playing defenders that can actually unlock the defense from anywhere. As you go down the leagues, as you go down the table, centre back pairings become a bit trickier because you then have to decide between using ball playing defenders or central defenders, or indeed no nonsense centre backs. For mid-table teams like Sampdoria that I have also selected in this save, if you have centre backs that can actually play the ball out, let's just peep at Sampdoria's centre back pairings, right? Let's look at the players that they have in defense. Away with the goalkeepers and defensive midfielders and the attackers, and then we'll get to the defenders. Looking at the defenders that Sampdoria have, their best centre half is Tommaso Augelu. No, that's a wing back. The centre half is Julian Charlotte. He's also on loan. And then loan. So Maya Yoshida is the one centre half that and he's in Southampton anyway. Or has he moved from Southampton to Sampdoria? So Maya Yoshida is not the most aggressive centre half, but he has good marking and his passing is 10, vision is 10. So you would ideally you wouldn't want to use Maya Yoshida as a ball playing defender, right? You want to use him as a central defender because he has some composure to hold on to the ball and play it to a more creative player. Ideally, the player that you would want, if Maya Yoshida, for example, had a higher aggression, he would likely be a no-nonsense centre-back because, well, he can also be a player on stopper duty as well. But since he has semi-aggression but a lot of anticipation and bravery and composure, concentration as well, his best role would be to play as a central defender on defend duty. And so for mid-table teams, one of the best bet you can go for is to have two central defenders on some defend duty, and you can also use one central defender and one no-nonsense centre-back. On rare occasions, should you use the ball-playing defender in this scenario because the ball-playing defender will try to be more adventurous on the ball, and if his passing isn't great, he's going to give the ball away too many times, and he's just going to get the ball back to the opposition, and they're going to bring it back and keep oppressing you in that sense. So if you have, like I said, in rare occasion that you have one defender in your mid-table team that has very good passing range and very good vision, you can use the ball-playing defender paired with one central defender for a mid-table team. A question I get from some of my friends is, can I use a ball-playing defender and a no-nonsense centre-back at the same time? Ideally, I think this setup is quite confusing because the no-nonsense centre-back would look to clear the ball out as soon as possible, and the ball-playing defender would look to find that killer ball in the opposition's defence. If these two players are not in relation with or in close chemistry with each other, it's going to be catastrophic because your team would just be giving the ball away way too often. The no-nonsense centre-back will be clearing the ball long, and the ball-playing defender, if he doesn't have good passing, he will be looking to find that killer ball, and he'll always be losing possession. So basically, you're gifting the possession to the opposition if you're using if you're using both pairings. So ideally, it's good to pair the no-nonsense centre-back with a central defender that is more composed and more patient with possession and looking to give it to a more safer player, and then the other destroyer that can just clear the ball out. Or to use the no-nonsense centre-back with, okay, never use both no-nonsense centre-backs, by the way. So it's to use the no-nonsense centre-back with one central defender, or to use two central defenders in your defence. On rare occasions, you can use the one central defender and the one ball-playing defender, but that is only if you have one ball-playing defender that is very good at passing and has good vision and good passing range. For Salernitana, they are last on the table and they are predicted to not finish. They are likely the weakest team in the league, right? So when you're using a lower table or a lower team, an underdog team in the league, ideally if your players do not have good passing range, good vision, do not bother using the ball playing defenders because you will just be gifting away possession to the opposition, in my sense. And I've seen that happen in Football Manager way too many times, that one player spends so much time on the ball and then the opposition just comes, presses, and then gets the ball from him and scores. A player that could have actually cleared the ball a lot sooner. When you're using a very small team like Salernitana, it's recommended that you use the no-nonsense centre-back a lot. You can have one no-nonsense centre-back on defend duty and then two central defenders on defend. That way your two central defenders can be more recycled and more composed in possession, and that you can use the no-nonsense centre-back to be the one to clear the ball out of danger as soon as the ball is in his possession. That way the opposition will have to go all the way back and start recycling possession and coming all the way to your defence again. And in that time, your team has already gone into shape and set up well quite closely to get the best or to stop the opposition from coming back and scoring, and the cycle just continues. So if you have a no-nonsense centre-back in your defence as a small team, this is very, very useful for you, as you can get the ball out of your defence as soon as possible. The other centre-back pairings as central defenders do work for smaller teams, but if you have two central defenders, you can go for two central defenders. But like I mentioned, just like in mid-table teams, if you do not have a ball-playing defender in your team as a smaller team, there is no reason you should use a ball-playing defender. I'm sticking to three at the back for Salernitana because we can cover the wide centre-backs. The wide centre-backs are defenders that are slightly more adventurous regardless of the role that you give to them. The wide centre-back, from my observation, has played or plays a lot like the wing-back on defend duty, but it's just that he is a lot narrower than the wing-back on defend. So when the wide centre back is, well, ideally the wing back on defend will get all the way up into this area and try and, like the wing back on defend it and try and recycle possession from here. But ideally the wide centre back would operate in the same manner but slightly narrower in somewhat the half spaces. But when he's on defend duty, he's not likely to overlap or make those underlapping runs into the box and try and get into scoring positions. On support duty, on the other hand, the wing back on support duty will be like we see here in the description so far. He will be willing to make those overlapping and underlapping runs to find himself in one-on-one situations. That's what the wide centre back on support duty will do. And on attack, his prime objective is going to be to get into the box and make those overlapping runs and always find himself in that position. Now, for lower league teams like Salernitana or teams that are 20th on the table, I do not recommend using the wide centre back except on defend duty. If you have a player that has that physical ability, ideally you want to use a wing back on defend in this position, or at least train your wing back on defense. So as much as the game has evolved to introduce wide centre backs to us, there aren't a lot of wide centre backs in the game as we go lower down in the leagues. So you might have to train your wing back that is very defensive with poor crossing, for example. You can be training to play as your wide centre back on defend duty if you're using a small team. If your team is quite medium or top level teams, you can use a wide centre back on support duty or on attack duty. But the thing with support and attack duty is this player is going to need to have very good stamina and very good work rate. Pace somewhat, but his mental ability and concentration and anticipation has to be really, really high for him to know how to get into spaces and get into the one-on-one situation and find himself with a chance to go on goal. Is it possible to use two wide centre backs? Yeah, it's possible, but you're going to need to have one very good central defender or ball playing defender that is holding the fort alongside him. Also, you're going to need to have a central defender in this position to try and help out the central defender to have a defensive midfielder in this position to try and help out the central defender in defense. That is if your wide centre backs are going to play on more adventurous roles like support and attack duty, for example. So if also possible, if you have inverted wing backs in this position that are playing on support duty, you can have your wide centre backs be more adventurous, knowing that your inverted wing backs will try and get into this region here and help the defensive midfielder and create a sort of mid-block mid-block protection for the middle of the field and help out the defense anyway. So you can use two wide centre backs, but use it with caution. If you're using a small team like Salernitana, do not bother using the wing back on support duty. Always try to keep them on defense, because your objective, as much as you want to score goals a lot, you need to try and stop conceding a lot of goals. So that's the objective of creating a good centre back pairing. So I feel like I've barely scratched the surface with this. Like, there's a lot to cover when it comes to central defenders in Football Manager, and obviously I think I've covered the basics of pairing up central defenders, right, for top teams, for mid-table teams, and for bottom teams like Salernitana in the Serie A. I don't know why I keep saying that, but that's basically how you can set up your centre back pairings, right? For more advanced centre back pairings, you could probably ask me questions in the comment section, by the way, so I'll have an answer for you anyway. I'm going to ask somebody who knows a lot more about creating roles and creating relationships in defense. So that's the summary of this video, guys. Remember, if you found it useful and it helped you set up your defense in a certain way, or if it helped you make a better decision in your defensive partnership, remember to leave a like for this video and also to leave a comment as well. Also subscribe to the channel, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.